The stage is bathed in a warm, ethereal glow, and thousands of voices rise in a deafening crescendo, chanting her name. Sandi Patty stands at the microphone, the undisputed queen of Christian music, her voice a soaring, pristine instrument that seems to touch the very gates of heaven. To the world, she is the definition of grace, a vessel of divine purity, and the flawless matriarch of a perfect family. But as the last note echoes and the curtain falls, the camera moves closer, catching the sudden, suffocating panic in her eyes. In the suffocating silence of the dressing room, the applause fades into an agonizing ringing. Behind the multi-million-dollar smile and the gospel trophies lies a fracturing reality, a secret life of forbidden love, profound isolation, and a desperate, exhausting deception. For years, she has walked a tightrope over an abyss of ruin, terrified of the day the music stops and the truth comes to light. How long can a soul sing of salvation while drowning in its own unspoken condemnation? The air in the arena is thick with the scent of hairspray, ozone, and anticipation. 10,000 people hold their breath as a single spotlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating a woman who looks less like a human and more like an angel carved from light. Sandi Patty takes a breath, and when she sings, the room vanishes. It is a voice of impossible purity, a sonic miracle that makes grown men weep and convinces the brokenhearted that God is in the room. But beneath the heavy velvet of her gown, Sandi's hands are shaking. The applause is a roaring ocean, but to her ears, it sounds like water rushing over a drowning ship. The year is 1989. To the Christian music industry, Sandi Patty is not just an artist. She is an institution. She is the golden standard of faith, family, and flawless devotion. But the third-person omniscient view reveals a devastating truth. The woman on the stage is a ghost haunting her own life. Every lyric she sings about grace feels like a stinging indictment. In the quiet sanctuary of her tour bus, away from the demanding eyes of managers, record executives, and adoring fans, Sandi sits in the dim glow of a single reading lamp. The silence here is heavy, thick with an unspoken misery. She looks at her reflection in the dark window pane, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The industry has built a cage around her, gilded in gold and lined with platinum records, and the bars are tightening. The pressure to be perfect is an invisible hand crushing her chest. She is a mother, a wife, a spiritual beacon, and she is profoundly, desperately lonely. It is in this deep, psychological vacuum that a dangerous warmth creeps in. A kind word from a colleague, a shared look that lingers a second too long, an understanding silence. It starts not with malice, but with a desperate hunger to be seen as a human being, not an icon. Slowly, the boundaries begin to blur. A secret companionship forms in the shadows of the tour, a quiet rebellion against the impossible standards she is forced to carry. For the first time in years, she feels alive, but the cost of that vitality is a terrifying fracture in her reality. She is stepping off the pedestal into a darkness she cannot predict. She returns to her dressing room after an encore that shook the rafters. The adoration of the crowd still vibrates through the floorboards, but inside the room, the atmosphere is freezing. She smiles mechanically for the photographers, her eyes bright and dead. As the room finally clears, she sinks in her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She glances down at her vanity table. There, resting against her makeup case, is a plain white envelope. No postage, no name. Just a jaggedly torn piece of paper. With trembling fingers, she slides it open. The handwritten words seem to bleed into the paper. I know who you are when the lights go out. The room tilts. The applause outside is still echoing, but the cage is just locked from the outside. A double life is not built in a day. It is meticulously constructed, brick by agonizing brick in the dark. For Sandi Patty, the stage becomes a theater of the absurd, a place where she must proclaim the ultimate truth while living the ultimate lie. The contrast is devastating. 1 hour she is leading thousands in worship, her face radiant with divine joy. The next, she is standing in the suffocating shadows of a service elevator, whispering a hurried, desperate arrangement into a payphone. She has become an architect of shadows, mapping out a reality where her public grace and her private passion can never cross paths. The psychological toll of the deception begins to erode her from the inside out. The narrator observes the subtle shifts, the way her eyes dart to the door whenever a phone rings, the sudden, uncharacteristic sharpness in her voice when assistants ask too many questions about her schedule. She lives in a state of perpetual hypervigilance, an adrenaline-fueled nightmare where every shadow is a threat and every smile feels like a betrayal. She goes home to her family, navigating the familiar routines of domestic life, but her mind is miles away, trapped in hotel rooms and rented cars where the rules of her world don't apply. The guilt is a physical weight, a dull ache in her stomach that never leaves. She looks at her children, her husband, her parents, and the shame is so intense it threatens to make her physically ill. Yet, the forbidden romance has become her only oxygen. It is a toxic lifeline, a place where she is allowed to be messy, broken, and flawed, away from the suffocating expectations of her career. She convinces herself that she can keep the plates spinning forever. She becomes a master of compartmentalization. In one box, she places the pristine gospel star. In another, the woman desperate for a love that feels real, even if it is wrong. But human hearts are not built for such fractures. The walls between her two worlds are growing dangerously thin, sweating under the immense pressure of the secret. She is singing songs of freedom while bound in chains of her own making, waiting for the inevitable moment when a single misstep destroys everything she has built. It is a rainy Tuesday in Nashville. Sandy is in a closed-door meeting with her management team, discussing a massive upcoming multi-city arena tour. The budget is in the millions. The expectations are astronomical. Her manager, a sharp-eyed man who has guided her career from the beginning, stops shuffling papers. He leans forward, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that makes her blood turn to ice. "Sandy," he says softly, his voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioner. "We've been getting some strange calls from promoters in Texas. They're asking about expenses and hotel bookings that don't match the tour schedule. Is there something we need to talk about before we announce this tour?" The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the steady, mocking tick of the wall clock. There is a specific horror to a slow-motion catastrophe, the knowledge that the avalanche has begun and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop the snow from burying you alive. The rumors, once just a faint, malicious static on the fringes of the gospel music community, begin to solidify into concrete accusations. In the executive suites of Nashville's most powerful Christian record labels, whispered conversations cease the moment Sandy walks into the room. The atmosphere shifts from reverence to calculation. An icon is a valuable commodity, but an icon tainted by scandal is a liability that must be managed or excised. Sandy can feel the net tightening around her. The psychological isolation is now total. She can trust no one, not even those who claim to protect her. The internal tension is agonizing. She continues to perform, but the joy is completely gone, replaced by a grim, survivalist dread. Every time she takes the stage, she wonders if it will be her last. The third-person omniscient perspective reveals her inner monologue, a chaotic loop of panic, bargain-making with God, and a deep, crushing sorrow. She knows the rules of the world she inhabits. In the strict conservative evangelical culture of the early 1990s, grace is preached, but perfection is demanded. Divorce is a stain. Infidelity is an unforgivable treason against the kingdom. The confrontation happens not on a grand stage, but in a sterile, wood-paneled boardroom filled with men in suits, pastors, executives, advisors. The air is heavy with condemnation disguised as spiritual concern. They present her with dates, names, and receipts. The architecture of her deception, which she had spent years building and guarding, is dismantled in a matter of minutes. The mask is violently ripped away. She sits at the long table, looking at the evidence of her secret life strewn across the polished mahogany. She sees the disappointment, the anger, and the cold calculation in the eyes of the men who once profited from her piety. They are not there to save her. They are there to manage the fallout. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. She is completely, utterly alone. The pedestal has shattered, and the fall has begun. The head of the label leans forward, sliding a typed statement across the table toward her. It is an admission of guilt, a carefully worded public confession designed to minimize financial damage to the company. "If you sign this, we control the narrative," he says, his voice devoid of warmth. "If you don't, the press will write their own story tomorrow morning." Sandy looks down at the pen in her hand. Her fingers are frozen. She knows that signing that paper means the death of her career, the public exposure of her deepest shames, and the destruction of her family's peace. She looks up, her voice a fragile whisper. "And if I need time to think." The executive doesn't blink. "Sandy, you're out of time." The world does not end with a bang. It ends with the click of a radio being turned off. Within 48 hours of the public disclosure, Sandy Patty's voice is systematically erased from the airwaves. Stations that had played her songs on a loop for a decade suddenly drop her from their playlists. Christian bookstores pull her albums from the shelves, burying her face in cardboard boxes in the back rooms. The condemnation is swift, absolute, and righteous. The woman who had been their angel is now cast down, a cautionary tale whispered from pulpits across the nation. The narrative moves into the suffocating quiet of her suburban home. The blinds are drawn, blocking out the aggressive lenses of paparazzi parked at the end of her driveway. Inside, the silence is a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. The phone has stopped ringing. The friends who had happily ridden the waves of her success have vanished into the mist of her disgrace. The psychological transition from global icon to public pariah is a violent, disorienting whiplash. Sandy wanders through the quiet rooms of her house, a ghost in a museum of her past achievements. The Grammy Awards and Dove trophies sitting on the shelves look like mockery now, relics of a life that belonged to someone else. She sinks into a deep, paralyzing depression. The guilt of the pain she has caused her children and her family is a blade that twists in her heart with every breath. She watches the news reports, reads the scathing articles written by people who claim to speak for God, and she feels the crushing weight of public shame. It is a modern-day stoning, executed with ink and airwaves. In this profound darkness, she is forced to confront the wreckage of her soul. Without the applause, without the music, without the adoration, who is she? For her entire adult life, her identity was tied to her voice and her perceived perfection. Now both are gone. She is stripped bare, forced to sit in the ashes of her own making and look at the raw, unvarnished truth of her humanity. It is an agonizing, necessary death of the ego. Weeks bleed into months. One evening, as the shadows lengthen across the living room floor, Sandy sits at her piano. She hasn't touched the keys since the day the story broke. Her fingers hover over the ivory, trembling. She presses a single, low chord. The sound resonates through the empty house, rich and melancholy. She closes her eyes, a tear cutting a path through the dust on her cheek. She opens her mouth to sing, but no sound comes out. The voice that had captivated millions is completely gone, locked away behind a wall of grief. She stares at the keys in horror. The music hasn't just stopped, it has abandoned her. True grace is not found in the absence of a fall. It is found in the dirt, where you are forced to rebuild yourself from the broken pieces left behind. Years pass, and the screaming headlines fade into the archives of gospel music history. The world moves on to new icons, new voices, new scandals. But for Sandy Patty, the journey is just beginning. The exile, which felt like a death sentence, slowly transforms into a sanctuary. In the quiet obscurity of her new life, away from the blinding glare of the spotlight, the slow, agonizing process of resurrection begins. The transformation is not sudden, nor is it glamorous. It happens in the quiet therapy rooms, in tearful conversations around kitchen tables, and in the painful, honest reconstruction of her relationships. The third-person omniscient perspective reveals a profound shift in her spirit. The paralyzing fear of being found out is gone, replaced by the terrifying but liberating reality of having nothing left to hide. She married the man she loved, enduring the judgment of the world to build a life based on truth rather than a beautifully curated lie. She learns to mother her children not as a flawless saint, but as a real, present, and deeply human woman. Slowly, tentatively, the music returns. It does not return with the bombast of an arena tour or the pressure of a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. It begins in a small, local church, where she's asked to sing not as a headliner, but as a member of the community. She steps up to the microphone, her hair silvering, her face lined with the indelible geography of a woman who has survived a storm. When she opens her mouth, the voice is different. The impossible, crystalline perfection of her youth has given way to something far deeper, far more resonant. It is a voice with texture, a voice that carries the weight of sorrow, the grit of repentance, and a genuine, unforced beauty of soul that has known the depth of the valley and survived. She is no longer singing to maintain a pedestal. She is singing because she has to breathe. Her legacy is rewritten. She is no longer the untouchable queen of Christian music. She is the patron saint of the broken, a living testament to the fact that life does not end when a mask falls. The camera pulls back as Sandy finishes her song in the intimate auditorium. There are no flashing lights, no screaming fans, just a room full of people listening in profound, respectful silence. She lets out a long, slow breath, a genuine, peaceful smile gracing her lips. She looks directly into the lens, her eyes clear, steady, and entirely unafraid. The screen fades to black as her final words echo into the quiet theater. I spent years terrified that the world would find out I was broken. But it was only when I lost everything that I finally found out what it means to be free.